For 13 centuries the Kthāveri Sentinel had remained still in the heart of New Geneva Station. 1,358 years, 4 months, and 16 days of hushed awe and ritual. What had once been a living, crystalline citadel of protection now glowed only a waning amber, its brilliance bled away by time and sacrifice. The station's shrine wrapped around the construct like a cathedral around a relic. Pilgrims and technicians alike spoke softly in its presence, because this machine was not merely technology, it was a storied guardian. Commander Zexathala of the Galactic Preservation Council made her vigil there in the prescribed pose of mourning. 4 arms folded, bioluminescent neck patches cycling through the muted colors of grief. Her faceplate and mandibles reflected centuries of solemn duty. She listened, with that precise stillness of officials who had catalogued sorrow for eons, while Lieutenant Vorchin reported the cold tally. 47 species had tried to restore the Sentinel. They had brought wonders, Ultron technomancers with shimmering arrays, Kthāveri teams who manipulated quantum crystalline matrices in ways that bordered on ritual, and each attempt had ended the same. The core of the Sentinel, its so-called Guardian's quantum consciousness matrix, had reached entropy death. It could not be awakened. The Council's consensus was absolute. For an instant the chamber felt like the vacuum between stars. Empty, immutable. Zexathala's patches flashed the color of incredulity and anger. How could anything fix what 47 advanced civilizations could not? The Sentinel had saved trillions in a war against the Void Plague. Its consciousness had burned out saving others. It had become more than a machine. It was a symbol of sacrifice that could not be replaced. That was why, when Vorchin added with a faint, almost embarrassed inflection that a human representative was insisting on an audience, the commander allowed a small, skeptical sound to escape, a breath like wind across a crystalline rim. "Send them in," she said at last. If nothing else, she thought, it would make a good coda to the closure report. When the human entered the chamber, he dismantled expectations at a glance. He was shorter than the ornate envoys in grease-stained coveralls with a battered toolbox slung at his side. He carried no shimmering instrument arrays, no ceremonial garb. Yet his stride was easy, and his posture communicated confidence born of hands that had actually fixed things. He introduced himself plainly, Jake Martinez, Station Maintenance. His greeting was blunt, casual, even irreverent. "Heard y'all got a big robot that won't turn on," and it made the commander's patches flare in a shock of crimson indignation. To the Council the Sentinel was holy, not an appliance. Jake did not apologize for his informality. He said what maintenance crews always say when called to a stubborn system. Machines of any scale can stop working for mundane reasons. All of civilization's dazzling theories and quantum theories could not change the basic truth he'd learned on thousands of repair calls. Energy must flow where it's needed. He walked the Sentinel's base with the practiced inspection of a human who reads the language of seams, vents, and maintenance panels. Where expert teams had decoded exotic core symbology, Jake looked for connections, couplings, places where power makes the trip from one module to another. His multimeter was humble beside Kthāveri probes, generating simple beeps and numbers rather than shimmering visualizations, but the data said what Jake's experience expected. Primary power couplings, the direct rails that fed the consciousness core, were depleted. Emergency reserves still held charge, but a break in the connection blocked the flow. A blown coupling, perhaps a burnt relay, perhaps a fused regulator frozen in the Sentinel's hibernation cycle. Where the technomancers had stared at the quantum matrix and tried to restart consciousness, Jake found the network that supplied it. Physics, he said simply, is indifferent to ceremony. What followed was both small and enormous. Jake slid beneath an unnoticed maintenance lip and worked where others had not thought to probe. He relied on techniques that would be incomprehensible to some, a focused physical persuasion of crusted components, a percussive jar to free a seized regulator, and on improvisation, a temporary wire bypass to reconnect reserves while the longer repairs were planned. It was not elegant. It was not theoretical. It was a blend of intuition, rhythm, grease, and stubbornness. Metallic clanging echoed from inside the Sentinel as seized regulators yielded and contacts cleaned themselves under Jake's insistence. A human curse under his breath, the sound of a technician speaking to an object as if coaxing life, and then a small triumphant word, "Found it." When the bypass closed and the last contact made, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The amber glow brightened to gold, then to a brilliant, pure white. Systems that had been inert for more than 1,000 years began to sing, ancient circuits harmonizing into a note like singing crystal. Heads turned as the Sentinel's optics tracked its surroundings for the first time in an age. A voice, not metallic in a way that mocked organics, but resonant, deliberate, and ancient, filled the chamber. Status report. Guardian protocol reactivated. Threat assessment in progress. Gratitude acknowledged. Then, in a tone that carried something between respect and simple appraisal, the Sentinel made a single personal notation: small engineer. The phrase hung in the air like a benediction from a thing that had watched galaxies burn and now judged a stranger's method. The station erupted in celebrations, relief, and immediate curiosity. News, not the kind transmitted in ornate scrolls but the rapid pulse of station alerts and messages, fluttered outward through the sector. The Sentinel had awakened. Delegations that had once regarded the construct as untouchable now looked at the human with new interest. Commander Zexathala, who had once tolerated the human's irreverence as an amusing footnote, now regarded him with something like stunned respect. "How?" she whispered, not only for the mechanics but for the philosophy behind them. Jake's exit was as matter-of-fact as his entrance. He shouldered his toolbox, wiped his hands on a rag, and reminded the gathered custodians to schedule regular maintenance checks. His advice was prosaic but crucial. Ensure energy pathways are maintained. Do not let centuries of reliance on storied resilience replace routine inspection. The Sentinel, newly awake, filed the encounter into its vast databases. The notation was clinical but forward-looking: human methodology. Unorthodox but effective. Recommend priority cooperation protocols. That notation would come to matter in years to come. The Sentinel's assessment transformed how sectors judged newcomers and modified archaic protocols that favored pedigree over practical knowledge. The galaxy learned a small, stubborn lesson writ large. Extraordinary systems often fail for ordinary reasons, and sometimes the solution comes from someone who respects how things break as much as how they are built. With its sensors and guardianship restored, the Sentinel resumed its eternal watch. The galaxy slept a little safer that night, humbly reminded that the greatest solutions sometimes wear grease and a toolbox.